Okay, I think we're good to go. Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora, and good morning. Welcome to this special COP26 discussion on faith, spirituality, and inclusivity, how our communities can work toward climate justice in fighting the devastating results through climate change. I'm Sarawat Tasneem, an interfaith advocate, and I've had the honour of serving on the COP26 President-elect's Faith Advisory since early this year, supporting faith-based environmental, climate and biodiversity groups in the Global South to contribute at this year's UN COP26. Today is also the inaugural launch of Faiths for Climate Justice Pilgrimage Weekend by the Interfaith Advisory to the UNFCCC, a globally connected interfaith movement bringing together people of faith and none to action or advocate peacefully leading up to 12 noon, where congregations across the globe will join in meditation or be silent in prayer, virtually or in person. This begins in Aotearoa, New Zealand, followed by Australia and cities across the world. For those wanting to join our COP26 reflection at the end of this webinar, you are all welcome to do so. We will also be submitting the multi-faith and communities appeal from some of the representatives and leaders here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We have a fantastic panel of speakers who will share advice, insights, and stories. If you'd like to submit a question, please do so either in the comment box or the Q&A, and please keep your messages and questions respectful. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Nick Baker, COP26 President-elect's Director of Engagement, who is joining us from the UK. Good evening, Nick. Thank you for joining us all the way from the UK.
Thank you. Good evening, Sawa, and good morning to everyone who's in a different time zone. I join you from Glasgow. I can't say that I'm in the SEC conference centre at the moment, which I left about an hour and a half ago, but I am in a very green hotel room, as you can see. But it's great to be with you today. So Sawa, what would be helpful now? Is it just to kind of say a few words about the really important role that faith communities have to play in the COP process?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I suppose we can start with your role and its reach to delegates, groups, and businesses. This has obviously been highly crucial in making COP26 inclusive and a success. So it would be great for you to share a bit more about how these conversations that began months ago have now actualized at COP26.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my team works on engagement of all non-state actors. So that's a very broad spectrum of organizations and people and communities. So it includes civil society organizations, youth organizations, faith organizations and communities, businesses, cities, regions, and many others. And really, our philosophy behind COP26 is that we need to bring everyone together to deliver the step change that's needed to tackle this urgent global problem that is climate change. And only by everyone working together, collaborating, which is one of the key themes and goals of COP26, are we going to achieve what we need to do to tackle this global problem. So I mean, faith communities have a very, very important role to play in this. And I mean, that was marked by the faith declaration, a multi-faith declaration that was presented to COP President now, actually, Alok Sharma, as he became on the first day of COP26. So instead of COP President designate, he is now COP President. Was presented to him at the Vatican at the beginning of October by world faith leaders. And it is a very powerful declaration urging ambitious action from the world's leaders, both governments, but also others as well. And I think faith communities have a huge role to play in advocating for ambitious action, but also taking action themselves as well. I was at an event at Lambeth Palace with the Archbishop of Canterbury only a couple of weeks ago, just in the run-up to COP, talking about the role that the church, of England can play in tackling climate change, and discussing that with young people. And it was really inspiring. So much energy, so much commitment, but also a real eye-opener as to how much can be achieved through the faith communities. Both as individuals, but also collectively, and as institutions and as organizations. The Archbishop of Canterbury was talking about the huge investments that the church has, and how that can be directed to supporting climate-related projects and investments. But also the huge estate that the church has, and greening that, and making sure that it's supporting the aims and ambitions enshrined in the Paris Agreement. So there is a huge role to play, and church leaders and communities have a huge moral authority with world leaders as well. So can encourage ambitious action from the global leaders that we've had assembled here in Glasgow, but also from others around the world as well. So with that, I think I'll finish there, Sawa, because I know others are speaking as well. But thank you very much for the invitation, for joining you today, and for everything that you're doing to encourage a really ambitious outcome here at COP26. There's been some great progress so far. We're only halfway through the 2 weeks of the conference, but we're cautiously optimistic as with the progress that we've achieved so far.
Thank you, Nick. No, that's been really helpful. We have a few questions actually to pose to you. One of which is, obviously you have seen, or have you seen any synergies between what faith communities have in terms of what they've been presenting, and how businesses can align themselves with those values?
Just finding the mute button still eludes me after a year and a half or 2 years of working remotely. I think definitely. I mean, we've been supporting the Race to Zero campaign that was launched by the UN high-level champions last June, and that's had a huge uptake with a load more new members joining up at the beginning of COP26, actually. And that's a really great way of very simply saying what your commitment is, laying out a plan for achieving it, and having an independent measure and assessment for delivering it. And a whole range of different organizations can join that. Doesn't necessarily need to be companies. Many of the members are, but there are universities, there are cities joining it, and I'm sure faith organizations as well. Equally, the Race to Resilience that was launched at the beginning of this year, that focuses on the other side of what we're really focused on here at COP. So one is reducing emissions and mitigation, and the other is really adapting to the impacts of climate change and the consequences of it, which are obvious all around the world. We've been seeing them over the last few months in particular, but I think it's all very, very clear for people to see the floods, the wildfires, the huge big storms. So adapting to that and building our resilience, particularly for the most vulnerable. And that's where I think the faith organizations have a really strong role to play, is putting the voice of those who are most marginalized and most impacted front and center, and they might not otherwise have that platform. And that's something very much that we've been really trying to achieve through this COP, is to bring everyone in and give everyone a platform.
That brings me on to my next question. So we've seen G20, G7. These have been partnerships between the UK and Italy, and we saw the historical Holy See Faith and Science event earlier last month, which we'll hear more about from Ambassador Trott. So what would you say to communities here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and nations in the Global South who feel disconnected to the conversation of climate change due to not having access to political leaders?
I would say that everyone is represented at COP26. I mean, going around the event, it is inspiring. All the pavilions, I've been responsible for the UK pavilion, but we've supported having an Indigenous Peoples pavilion, and actually the feedback we've had has been really encouraging, that particularly on Indigenous peoples, saying that they feel that they've been better represented at this COP than ever before. So we have tried to, despite all the constraints of COVID, and obviously we need to, the safety of everyone has been the top priority in organizing an event in these circumstances. But that notwithstanding, we have tried to make it as open as possible for everyone to be able to join, and that includes people from the global south, but also from many communities who wouldn't otherwise have a voice, whether that's through stands, participation in events, through our media and communications. There's a whole range of ways of, that people can join and participate.
That's great. That sort of really helps in the discussion of awareness, because I know through the journey that I've taken with communities here, it's literally been a learning curve in terms of what COP26 is. Now, you mentioned the four main goals, which is mitigation, finance, protect people and nature, and collaboration. Aotearoa is quite unique in that it is one of the developed nations, yet also is a country being represented in the Indigenous platform at COP26. Would you say that this is a country that could lead by example, pending commitments and agreements that are made over the next week?
I definitely think so. I mean, I don't know the specifics of the situation, but I mean, one of the things that we're really encouraging, whether it's countries, businesses, local communities, cities, is sharing experience, because I mean, that's a really powerful way of collaborating, is share what works and what doesn't work, and really kind of, if you have something that is really working, share that with others who might be able to apply it as well. And that's something that we've been trying to do in the build up to COP, but also at COP as well, to give a sense of momentum that, yes, there is a huge challenge that we're facing, but also give a sense of hope that there is a lot that is being done by many, many people around the world from all sorts of different walks of life. And it is inspiring, so that there is hope.
Now, I know the level of sheer effort and the hours of collaboration that has taken place behind the scenes, the global network from every continent. I don't know your own position regarding religion, Nick, but what has the process taught you about the ambitions of the Paris Agreement and the role that faith leaders can play going forward?
I think, I mean, the Paris Agreement is ambitious. We've seen with the reports that have been released over the summer by renowned scientists and including the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, showing that we're not on track. That despite everything that we've been doing, despite actually huge reductions in emissions through behavior changes through the pandemic, we're still not on track. So it gives a sense of the challenge that we face. But that said, I think, as I said, kind of to be able to deliver that ambition, we all need to work together. And faith organizations, faith communities, and the sheer number of people that encompasses has to be able to make a difference, I think. And hearing the action that is already being taken gives me a sense that really kind of faith communities can make a massive difference towards achieving this goal.
Thank you, Nick. It's been a pleasure. Please do stay with us. The submission will be presented to you very shortly. Now, the Honourable Minister Shaw, after receiving the multi-faith and community leaders statement last month, provided us with this message for me to read today. Kia ora. Thank you for your submission. Aotearoa New Zealand strongly encourages the involvement of Indigenous people and local communities in the global climate response. A key priority for New Zealand at COP26 is to empower and create opportunities for Māori and community representatives. It is critical that we create space for Indigenous communities and local communities to share their experiences and work with other Indigenous groups to strengthen Indigenous perspectives in the UNFCCC process. New Zealand recognises the important contribution civil society, including faith-based representatives, make to the UNFCCC process. We continue to push for open and inclusive decision-making. We will now hear from a few of the contributors to the submission, who will each provide a short reflection. I'd like to introduce Tui Hawke, who is a Maori youth leadership advocate and award winner. She travelled to the Philippines on a voluntary service mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints.
Ko maunga kia te maunga, ko wai te mata te moana, ko māhuhu ki te rangi te waka, ko Ngāti Whātua, Ngāti Apakura, Ngāti Parau, rātou, ko Ngāti Hauraki, ngā iwi, ko Tui o Takaparawhau Hawke ahau. Kia ora, hello. My name is Tui o Takaparawhau Hawke, and I'm blessed to carry the name of my ancestral lands, Takaparawhau. Echoing the words of my ancestors, ko au te whenua, ko te whenua ko, which means I am the land and the land is me. Yesterday, I was thinking about this conversation and I was really nervous. So I went to my urupa, which is a tribal burial site, and I sat and next to my ancestors, and I was just thinking, what could I say that would make a difference in this space? I got a gentle nudge and a knock on the head, and they just told me to keep going. So that gave me the reassurance that I needed to stand here and speak today. As a child, I remember walking with my grandfather on our land, the land that he, alongside his brothers and sisters, fought for, so that my generation could have a place to call home. While we were walking, he stopped and he picked up a snail. And he said to me, Tui, every creature, no matter how small, has a job, has an important role in the environment. So my papa's compassion is what helped to shape the way that I connect with the environment and the world around me. As a woman of faith, I also know that service is love in action. As Sawat said, I was blessed to go to the Philippines and sit and talk and laugh and conversate with the people there. And now as I sit and watch COP26 and see the devastating impact of climate change on our most vulnerable communities, I'm really moved with compassion. And just like my grandfather and the people who have come before me, I know that we have to, like Nick Baker said, unite and collaborate so that we can have a place for the future generations to call home. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Tui, for that beautiful reflection. We will hear more from you later. Now, next, I would like to introduce Reverend Cynthia Murphy, who is Māori and a member of the Anglican Indigenous Network, Anglican Church in Aotearoa, New Zealand and Polynesia, and a COP15 biodiversity contributor.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā kaimahi o te taio, tēnā rā koutou katoa. We learn from scripture that humankind was formed of dust from the whenua, from the ground. The Hebrew word bara is used at different places to describe the creation of human and other than human life forms. In the Christian sacrament of baptism, the Anglican liturgy of Aotearoa, New Zealand and Polynesia says, "We thank you, God, for your love in all creation, especially for your gift of water to sustain, refresh, and cleanse all life. Then at life's end, our bodies are committed back to the Creator with these words, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It is within this quantum of our lifespan that we embed our hope for all of creation, and in our faith, take our place alongside all living things, all the days of our lives. He kākano ahau. I am a seed, pushed forth from creation, quenched by life-giving water, and lovingly nurtured by my ancestors before me, to live sustainably, so that at life's end, when I am returned to where seeds emerge, I may give my eternal gratitude for a life well lived. It is my responsibility as kaitiaki, planted in scripture and schooled in tikanga or protocols, to lovingly care for all the elements that enhance our journeys from beginning to end. Māori, the indigenous peoples of Aotearoa, have a saying, whatu ngaro ngaro te tangata, toi tū te whenua. People will disappear from sight. The land will remain. To belong to the generational seeds of life in harmony with all other life is to each flourish and prosper. This is our blessing from the Creator. He kākano ahau. Nō reira, kia tau te rangi Māori e kia koutou katoa. Peace be with you all.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Virpal Singh, Secretary of the Sikh Council of New Zealand.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. This is a prayer that is said before every occasion in the Sikh community. Tu Thakur, tum pair das, jio pind sab teri ras, tum mat pita hum bark tere, tumri kirpa mein sukh kanere, koi na jane tumra ant, uche te ucha bhagwant, sagal samagri tumre sutar tari, tumte hoye swagyakari, tumri gat mit tum hi jani, nanak das sada kurbani. The central theme of this prayer, this blessing, is that everything that we see, we don't see, has come into existence because the Creator, the Almighty, has wished so, has brought them into existence, and they are all as pearls in a necklace are connected together. And that, I think, is the central idea of all the presentations which have happened, that we are all connected, whether it's earth, whether it's the living beings, whether it's the non-living. So to tackle the environmental issues, the best mode or the best way seems to be to work together as one. Let's rise above faiths or races or countries, whatever else we as human beings have created the boundaries and the borders, and let's rise together and act as human beings, as living beings, as part of this earth, and see how our actions, our policies, our existence is impacting everything as a whole. And that seems to be the way forward. And I'm encouraged by all the submissions and the proceedings at the conference that I have followed, that we seem to be moving towards this realization. And as on behalf of the Sikh community, I commit to playing our part in making this possible and success. Thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so much, Virpal. And finally, Robert Hunt, Chair of the Buddhist Council of New Zealand. Sorry, Robert, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Ko papa tuanuku, na mana whenua, na mana hiri, tuorangi e, our Earth Mother, people of our land, visitors from afar, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Salutations to you, Ambassador Chris Trott and Director Nick Baker. As each of our faith streams represented here prepared what are called leaders' statements, we drew deeply. We drew on the understanding, the strength, and then the endorsement from our faith and spiritual constituencies. What I think we've all noticed is an unprecedented arising of concern. And we used to say here in the European, we say Pākehā, tangata tiriti in this country, we used to say the grassroots, but we now say the flax roots. At the flax roots of our communities, we are seeing an emboldening, a call for global restraint, a call for justice. And we found parallels in our responses to the pandemic. You may have heard that here the government called for action to go early and strong. We are calling for the global leaders to go strong and early, even at this late hour, towards protecting the very web of life. So we are diverse, and we are in many ways here still finding each other, but we're finding that we are part of a larger weaving of change, a spiritual response to the deep concern for humanity's shared home. So we come to you today, Nick, united in respect, united in aspiration for change. We are encouraged, as Virpal said, but we also pass that encouragement to you. I've been asked to submit this statement to you symbolically. It's an offering. It's a gesture of trust and truth. We submit this statement to you, and we request for your good offices that decision makers are encouraged to lead more strongly, including to value the contribution and dialogue of the Indigenous, the tangata whenua of Aotearoa, and the support and influence of the faith networks we represent. For us Buddhists, we pledge our support. Our Buddha observed that personal suffering originates from inner craving and ignorance. A heart and mind once caught up in afflictions of greed and fear becomes deluded and inclined to unskillful deeds, which in turn engage in further cycles of suffering, only stopped when we see through our habitual narratives and find the causes in ourselves. So we see our ecological emergency is caused by these same afflictions playing out on a collective scale, and we call on all to take the spiritual time that they need to renew and to act skillfully to deal with root causes. So our voices are in this statement. We stand as one in pilgrimage, and in passing this to you, we make this call. Not accidental that one of the words resonates with Tui's name. Tui, 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 tuia mato. Tuia ki te mamai. Tuia ki te tu manako. Tui, tui, tuia ki te ora. Weave us together, weave us through pain, weave us through to hope, weave us through to life. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be safe and well.
Thank you, Robert. Nick, you are receiving this as part of the COP26 President-elect's core team. Is there anything you would like to say in response?
Thank you, Sawa, and thank you, Robert, as well. I mean, that's incredibly moving, and I think very timely, but also exactly what we would like to pass on is to the leaders and to those who are now, the world leaders have now left COP26, but we are in the middle of the negotiations, and that is kind of the crucial nub of it. So to urge those leaders of all the delegations that are assembled through the negotiations to lead more strongly, to be ambitious. I was amazed. I've not been to a COP before. This is my first one. I am a diplomat, so I know that negotiations are hard. But I was amazed that at the beginning of, on day one, a huge achievement was the fact that we had managed to agree the agenda, which gives a sense of how difficult it can be to get every country from around the world to agree to take the same action towards the same goals. We might kind of agree on the goal, but not necessarily the way to get there. So this declaration and this encouragement to be ambitious and for everyone to play their part is really powerful. So thank you very much, and I will take that back, and hopefully it will give those ensconced in negotiation rooms until the small hours of the morning that extra encouragement they need to deliver what the planet needs at the end of this conference.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you for your time. I do hope you can stay for the Q&A, and your comments are taken on board and very much appreciated. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, UK Ambassador to Holy See, Chris Trott. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Or should I say good morning? I'm along with Nick, the only other one who is still on yesterday.
well, thank you. No, we're here, well connected, and technology seems to be on our side. Touch wood. So many of us watched the live coverage of the historic appeal, Faith and Science towards COP26. You were very much involved in that special collaboration. Please, can you share the significance of that meeting and the message it created?
I'm very happy to do that. I think perhaps I should start with a little bit of history, just so that people understand where this initiative came from. I mean, I think that the engagement of some faith leaders in previous COP meetings had clearly, I think, made a difference. We particularly think about Pope Francis's engagement just before the Paris COP 5 years ago, in which he appealed to world leaders to take the necessary steps to protect the planet. And so following on from that engagement, I think my predecessors, because this was a 2-year process, my predecessors worked alongside the Italians and the Vatican to try to draw together a much wider group of religious leaders in order to speak directly to the COP leaders as they sat down in Glasgow this autumn. And as Nick said, the culmination of 8 months of discussions between the faith leaders was an appeal very similar to your own. What was very striking for me participating in those discussions was the common theme from whichever of the many diverse faith groups that were participating in this discussion. A common theme about our responsibility to protect the planet, our responsibility to hand the planet on to our children and our grandchildren in the way that we found it, or perhaps even if we're optimistic, in a better condition than we found it. This was the basis of the appeal. And it was, for me, an extraordinary moment when all those faith leaders gathered together here in Rome. After 18 months of COVID chaos, we weren't at all sure how many of them would make it. But there was a real determination amongst the leaders that had participated in this discussion to be there in the room and to be able to look the president of COP, Alok Sharma, as Nick said, who was in Rome to receive this document, look him in the eye and to say to him, this is your responsibility. You take on this responsibility on behalf of all those global leaders that you will be chairing in Glasgow in November. But there was a two-way deal that was done in this discussion, because the leaders appealed, the faith leaders appealed to the politicians to take some difficult decisions, set some ambitious targets for the globe. But at the same time, and this is very much reflected in what all of you have been saying this morning, at the same time, those faith leaders undertook to go back to their congregations, to go back to their temples or their churches, their mosques or their places of worship, to encourage people and to speak to people in their hearts and to say to them, this is what is necessary in order to fulfill our obligation as people of faith to protect our planet. So it was a very moving moment. And it's really exciting for me to be part of this discussion today, because we had this vision that there would be a kind of ripple effect flowing out from this meeting on the 4th and reaching as far into the global communities as we could. And I guess there's not much further away from Rome than where you are all sitting now. And it's so rewarding to feel that it has reached you. We had one South Pacific Islander included in our discussions, a vicar from Fiji. But because of COVID, he was one of the very few participants who didn't make it. And so to see you here and to feel your engagement on behalf of the Indigenous groups that you're part of, that you represent, is just really, really exciting. And it takes me back. I served in the Solomon Islands many years ago, and I know your part of the world very well. So I'm very pleased to be with you and very happy to take questions.
That's wonderful, Chris. Thank you so much. It brings me on to, I suppose, the first question I have for you. Faith is on the rise, and 84% of the global population identifies with a religious group. You have lived, as you've just shared, and worked in the global south, and to an extent have an affinity to this region. When fighting for climate justice from a faith perspective, or the human rights of Indigenous peoples and or the vulnerable who have been most impacted, can the faith voice be powerful in a secular society?
I think it can, and I think it should, and I think it will. I mean, I think when we sat in that room in the Vatican, politicians tend to take decisions based on sort of the numbers of people who are engaged, the numbers of people who are part of a campaign. And looking round that room on that day, we did a rough guesstimate, and we reckon that between 70 and 72% of the world's population were represented by their faith leaders in that discussion. Those leaders spoke for more than half the world. they must be listened to. And I'm sure that the president designate, as he then was, Alok Sharma's commitment to them was that we will ensure that your voices are heard. So this demonstrates the power of different faith groups coming together and standing up for what they believe is right. And you know, in many societies, Nick and I are part of one of them, you don't necessarily talk about your faith. You don't necessarily articulate what it means to you. But through this energy and through this channel, we are hoping to see real action globally on this climate issue.
Thank you. Another key message that came out of the Faith and Science Conference and from His Holiness Pope Francis was the connectedness we have to all of creation, the ecological crisis and the crisis of values, but also the strength that comes with spiritual closeness. Do you feel the climate crisis is an opportunity to bring the values of people of faith and none together?
Absolutely. And I mean, coming into the Vatican relatively recently, I can see the huge amount of work that's done here, not just on climate, but on all the issues that matter sort of for the future, the values in a way of Pope Francis are very well articulated and chime very nicely with the values of many of the other faith leaders. So he's worked on something called Fratelli Tutti, which roughly translates as "we are all brothers." This is a message to all of us. And it's not just about climate, it's about tackling poverty. It's about addressing conflict. It's about meeting those refugees and migrants who are being forced out of their home for whatever reason, and ensuring that their dignity is respected. And that dignity comes from them being human, which is, I think, a fundamental element of every faith or belief system, that we are all human, we all have our dignity. That dignity deserves to be respected.
Thank you, that's beautiful. I have one last question before we move on to the Q&A. I had the honor of being part of one of the Muslim delegations who attended the Faith and Science Conference at the Vatican. It felt like a call to humanity, but also a celebration of what unites us, yet also publicly share the aspect that science plays in faith and belief. What can we learn from the coming together of those 40 or so world faith leaders and scientists in terms of meeting the ambitions that the Paris Agreement set?
I think that one of the assumptions that we successfully debunked in early October was this assumption that by definition, science and faith are in conflict with one another. And that simply isn't true. And while the language that is used by scientists on climate, or maybe on other issues, but particularly on climate, may be different, the IPCC report that Nick referred to doesn't read in the same way as the appeal from the faith leaders that was submitted 3 weeks later. But there is a common understanding there that we can build on to make a difference. And it was very powerful listening to the scientists, not all of whom were necessarily people of faith, but who recognized that the language the faith leaders were using was speaking to them. And that's perhaps a model we can use for other things going forward, similarly to the list that I gave you earlier.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador Trott. We will now take some questions from attendees and panelists. I would just like to state that if you do have questions, if you are watching and you have joined us, please do use the Q&A tool at the bottom of the screen. But it'd be quite nice to open up hearing from the panelists, your questions you'd like to pose to Nick Baker and Ambassador Trott. Robert? and
But yes, I'd like to direct a question to you, Nick. You know, it's the convention in these matters to look to the aspirational, shall we say. What I find in practical terms, as representative of a faith organization, is that dialogue with government, particularly in a country which has a higher percentage of people without any affirmed faith than almost any, the dialogue with government is vestibular. It's only just beginning. What do you think secular governments need to most crucially learn to engage in these kind of, or you might respond, Ambassador Trott, I'm not sure who wished to take this. What can secular governments learn to not be afraid to speak with faith communities? There seems to be, because we experience a gulf. We experience public officials who would be, even when facilitating a hui, a meeting, calling faith leaders together, don't declare their own faith. And I find it or non-faith or belief or whatever, it's kind of viewed as treading on awkward terrain. So if we want to work together more, and we do, we need to find better ways of meeting between the flax roots and the government.
No, I think that's absolutely right, Robert. I think that it's maybe not instinctive, and there is a lot to learn. I mean, it's been great to kind of start the process through COP26 and the build up to COP26. But I mean, our presidency of COP has just started with on the first day of COP26 and lasts for the following year. So I think there's plenty of opportunity to build on the experience that we've had in the run up to the conference and carry that forward over the following year. And passing on to the next presidency. At the end of the day, climate change doesn't stop at COP26 and it won't stop at COP27. It's a long-term challenge that we face, and the next presidency will face the same. Hopefully we'll leave it in a better place. Chris was talking about stewardship, and I think that's a really kind of powerful concept, and one that's certainly been talked about a lot in many of the discussions that I've been hearing at COP26, that we do have a responsibility to hand on the planet in a better condition than what we found it. So I hope that we'll have learned some lessons from our experience engaging with faith communities in the run-up to COP. We will apply those through the coming year of our presidency, and we'll be able to hand that on to, I think, probably Egypt. I don't know whether that's yet official yet, but it sounds as if Egypt is likely to be the next presidents of COP27, so that process can continue. Very much in the same vein that it was kind of in the run-up to Paris as well. So I think you're right, Robert. There probably is lessons that we can learn from and kind of do better in terms of how we communicate and engage. So I'm keen to hear those.
Can I just add, Nick? I think, Robert, it extends across almost everything that we do in government. I think this uncertainty about how to most effectively engage with faith groups, and in our Foreign Office, we're now looking at trying to increase what we call religious literacy inside the Foreign Office to help people understand the importance of engaging with faith leaders and how to do that effectively to ensure that they are able to work out what shared values can be best worked on together. So it's an ongoing task, and it's certainly not perfect, but I think a lot of governments recognize now that this is something that we need to engage on.
Thank you, Ambassador. Virpal, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to add to what Ambassador Trott said regarding science and religion, because it seems that those who are challenging the very concept of climate change, they are using the faiths and religions platform. They are using either the lack of knowledge amongst the faith communities or their commitment to their faith against this posing a challenge to the action, any action on climate change. So it's very encouraging to see that the faiths are tackling this issue actively, proactively. And I'm encouraged, and I thank you, Ambassador Trott and Director Nick Baker, that this issue is actively handled. And if you would like to expand this further, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Virpal. Now, Mary Betts has posed this question: what is the most important thing individuals can do for the future of Earth and its people? I would like to put this question to you and to TUI, and to hear the response from Ambassador Trott and Nick Baker with the view of the youth lens, because we know youth are and have been crucial. We cannot, we cannot reverse the effects of climate change without having them, front and center going forward. So TUI, would you like to share your thoughts first, please?
So I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is to educate ourselves, like take responsibility to know what's going on. And that's a personal journey I'm on as a young person, navigating being Indigenous, being of faith, and being in a world where there's red alarms saying, there's things that we need to do. And just for me personally, the most important thing that I can do is to educate myself and to act on exactly what that is, and to have passion for the earth, because I believe that we can know so much, like we can know all of the facts, all of the statistics, but if we don't have passion or love for what our human race, our brothers and sisters, then nothing will happen. So I believe, education and love is what we can act on to make a difference for the future.
Thank you, TUI. Ambassador Trott, Nick Baker, would either of you like to expand on that?
I think that the key thing, TUI, is not to be afraid to talk about it, not to be afraid to engage on it. This is, after all, a planet we're going to be passing to your generation at some point, and you will then have the charge of stewardship. So make your voices heard. This is why it's important for faiths to be engaging in the discussions around COP, but this is also why it's important for young people to be engaging in discussions around COP. And I think today was Youth Day, wasn't it, Nick?
Yes, no, it was. And my team was responsible for pulling together the program for today. So there's been a lot of inspiring things going on at COP today. Our education minister, the UK education minister, was launching a climate leaders initiative. We had an event with education and climate ministers, first time that's been done at a COP, coming together and making climate education pledges. I think 23 countries made pledges about how they were going to incorporate climate change more into their school curricula. So really inspiring things. And then the backdrop of thousands of young people taking to the streets of Glasgow to demand more ambition and more change. So really kind of focusing minds. So a lot of inspiring things, and education, very key. It's one of the things that young people have been asking for more of, and passionately so, to really kind of increase the amount of education on climate change around the world. And then we had, I mean, of course, participation, involvement of young people throughout the programme today, handing over declarations both from the Conference of Youth, who are the official constituency group under the UN for young people, telling leaders about their declaration that they'd formed ahead of COP and what they were wanting to see out of COP. And from the Youth for Climate as well, which was hosted by Italy before COP. And I'd kind of finish off by saying a very inspiring event that I was at today was involved the Scouts. So thousands and thousands of young people from right around the world who are members of the Scouts. And the Global Scout Ambassador, who happens to be Bear Grylls, so very well known, just simply finished with his with the slogan of the Scouts, which I think really sums it up: let's help each other.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. We have a question that's come in that just Cynthia, it would be nice to hear your perspective. How best are we going to surpass the challenges of dichotomy and differences between and among faith groups, politics and or ideological beliefs, and also business interests in the journey of global struggle or protecting our planet? And perhaps Nick would like to answer that as well with reference to business.
Thank you, Kia ora, for that question. Yeah, that's something certainly, been in my vocabulary for a long time. It's when I think about the challenges we have, I think about, when I was at school all those many years ago, circles that overlap one another. And we're in the center of all those circles, there's that moral ethic or that commonality that we're finding in faith voices, in the business sector, scientists, you name it. Somewhere in the middle there, we all have that one goal. It's how we go about it that's different. And I think one of the biggest challenges is the moment for an Indigenous person brought up very poor, but in want of nothing. My food table, my kai table was always full, but we had to go and get it. We either had to go and get it or grow it. And I take umbrage to having to go and get a job, earn money to go to the supermarket to get the same food to put on my table. And so I struggle around economics. I think one of the biggest challenges that the planet has, that all governments have, is the economy. How are we going to achieve the aspirations? Yes, we have all the biodiversity aspirations. Yes. But we still have at the center in that circle is economy. And I'm challenged around, how does our faith, the faith community is also caught up in economics, dare I say. So it's not a quick answer necessarily, but I think, it's something that's really deeply embedded in all of us. We know, everybody knows what we have to do to make a difference. But as long as we're reliant on economics to fulfill that happiness, I think we've got a big challenge. I'm not sure if that answered the question or not, but that's something that rests very heavy on my heart around how do we, as a faith community, help and speak into those moral ethics of economy.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much. And sort of final closing statements from Ambassador Trott and Nick Baker. Ambassador Trott, would you like to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for including me in this really inspiring discussion. Thank you for letting me know about this conversation that is happening. And all power to you. I hope that you can I've just seen Mary's comment in the chat following up on the question that we answered. The only way that governments get to change their priorities is by people putting pressure on them and making it clear that they need to respond in the way that their constituents want them to respond. So please keep talking about climate change. Please keep engaging across the different faiths in this discussion, because together I think you can really make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And Nick?
I would really just echo that. Thank you for the invitation to join you today, and really do keep up the pressure. It really does make a difference, and I look forward to kind of hearing what happens next and continuing to engage.
Thank you very much. Well, sadly, that brings us to the end of this particular part of today's session. Thank you to all the speakers and contributors. I would like to share my gratitude to Nick Baker and Ambassador Trott for agreeing to join us so late in the UK. For everyone else, if you'd like to stay on and join us for a short interfaith reflection to open the COP26 pilgrimage weekend with Bishop Philip Huggins from Australia, who's joined us, and please do stay online. So I'm extremely pleased to introduce a friend and interfaith partner, Bishop Philip Huggins, President of the Council of Churches Australia. Good morning.
Good morning, dear Sawat. What a beautiful conversation that has been to listen to. Just completely wonderful.
Well, we're honoured to host you, and it would be fantastic for you to lead the first part of the reflection. For everyone who is joining us now, Bishop Philip Huggins and I are honoured to be part of the Interfaith Advisory to the UN FCCC, and our offer for COP26 has been the COP26 pilgrimage weekend and notes for prayers and meditation for a beneficial COP. So we invite everyone of faith and none to join us, and there are a manner of events that are being taken place across the globe as we speak, which has been really exciting and really encouraging. So I'll now hand over to Bishop Philip Huggins.
Yes, thank you, Sawat. And Sawat and I, as she says, have been encouraging people internationally to pray and to meditate, to apply their spiritual practice into UN COP26. And it's been wonderful to find the number of places and people that have been engaging in interfaith, in silent meditation and prayer, as we've been encouraging. Just to say a couple of things, this next week is absolutely crucial. And we've already been gathering from people some focuses for our prayers and our meditations. Just to put it in context, as one who knows a little about the COP process, the dear heads of delegations, the diplomats and the negotiators will already be tired. They've had a big week. Many of them have had to host the head of government, and a lot of detail around that. One of their roles is to represent their governments, but their role is also to represent back to their governments, as we've just been hearing, what is needed for the Paris Agreement to be fully implemented. So this next week, these people who've already been having very long days in a very tight time frame through to next Friday, have the task of representing to their governments what will help us bring the Paris Agreement to fulfillment. So in our prayers and meditations, applying our spiritual practice, some of the things we should be focusing on are just praying and meditating for the diplomats and the negotiators and the UNFCCC staff, that they be sustained, that they find the right way and the right message to convey back to their governments, in the case of the diplomats and negotiators and heads of governments, So we want to pray for their sustaining. I think we've asked, and I think some of the things we've heard, we really want to pray for our young people, both for the reasons given, the buoyancy, the love that's in them, the hope that's in them, but also for young people who, as they hear about climate change matters this past week, may have made them more anxious, may have amplified underlying issues of anxiety that they might already have. So we pray for our young people's well-being. Pertaining to the Paris Agreement, we're really praying for the completion of it, the rule book, Article 6, the matters of loss and damage, finance, matters of adaptation. We're also praying that by the end of the week, we're really clear that the voices of young people are heard in the outcomes. The voices of our Indigenous people, First Nation people are really heard. The voices of women are well represented. And in and through all of that, we're praying and meditating for a deeper unity between our inner and our outer ecology, that the beauty of our spiritual life is reflected in the beauty of our planet, that as we listen to one another, as we listen to our own true self, as we listen to the divine, as we listen to the creation, so we're able to find those next steps that bring us to that deeper unity of inner and outer ecology. So this is a huge week for the human family on planet Earth. In this complex culture of UN COP26, but all we can do from our different vantage points is offer all our love in our prayers and our meditations. So that's what we will continue to do.
Thank you, Bishop Huggins. I would like to offer a reflection within this interfaith space in seeking balance for all of creation and recognizing that humanity and what we live off and take from and regenerate all has purpose in the design of our existence. So if I may, as a Muslim, for the purpose of offering reflection, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, I see COP as an opportunity of all faiths in this moment of deep concern and compassion for the most vulnerable, to share that compassion and share in hope. A sacred passage from my sacred scripture, the Quran, reads as follows, Bismillah. So set your face firmly towards the natural way as a pure natural believer, Allah's natural pattern on which he made mankind. There is no changing Allah's creation. That is the true natural way, but most people do not know it. So I offer a contribution of hope and justice for those that have little yet suffer the most, a time to be grateful and recognize the privilege of having access to means that humankind so readily take for granted. Hope that the decisions at COP26 open paths for healthy, equitable outcomes, and change is put into place where we can reverse the effects so our children and our future, wildlife and earth, do not suffer at the hands of our generation's errors. I hope for better, just and compassionate collaboration where the developing nations no longer have to experience the perils of climate change because world leaders recognize the benefits of sustainable development. Please now do join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us, being part of this global movement. Bishop Philip Huggins, if you would like to share any more final thoughts.
It is very, very, very beautiful that we're bonded together in this most important work, and that the fruits of our spiritual practice can be offered in a unity that really reflects that we're one human family on this tiny planet, in this amazing creation, this amazing God creation, and that we have this day and the days that follow in order to make our planet as beautiful as is God's plan, and each of us, each other, help each other to really flourish. Peace be with you.
Thank you. And before we leave, I would like to invite everyone on this webinar, if you are interested in being part of this global COP26 benefits or beneficial COP26 with prayers and meditation, please do send an email to the organisers of this webinar, and we'll be very happy to send you the relevant information. We have a week, and this is an opportunity to unite. It's been a privilege to be part of this. It's been a privilege to host this, representing communities and beliefs and religions of Aotearoa. I wish you well. Godspeed. Take care.
Okay.